We'll kick off. Again, thanks for joining for the last session. My name's Ian. I'm head of sales for the North, land base, so I cover quite a large patch in the northwest of England. And today we've got the handsome James Cooper-Smith. Would you like to introduce yourself, James?
Yeah, I'm James. I'm the portfolio team manager here. I've been at Landbay almost 5 years now, dealing with our portfolio stuff and the more complex end of buy-to-lets, so limited companies, different structures, large HMOs, all the funky stuff really.
I know, yeah, a bit about me as well. I've been around for a good while as well. James and I used to work with each other for my first lender as a BDM back in 2005. And yeah, we've obviously come back together again. I've been in the market for what, 20 odd years as a broker before, and obviously a BDM. So hopefully there's a good knowledge behind both ourselves, well, myself and James knows his stuff when it comes to criteria as well. So without further ado, I'll give you an idea of what we're going to cover today. We're going to do a little bit of a differentiation with regard to how Landbay have a small portfolio, which is essentially very similar to the non-PRA guideline of the PRA guideline of a non-portfolio landlord. And we're going to kind of compare and contrast where we look at it. James is going to look at then the portfolio underwriting that we do behind the scenes. I'll have a look at some of the documentation we ask for. And the documentation, a lot of brokers get concerned with, but obviously the better you understand the documentation, the more beneficial it is to supporting the case and the less onerous it is as well. We'll do that, as I say, the criteria wrap up, because we'll talk about limited company, HMO and multi-unit. And if I'm not mentioned often enough, we have an excellent open work exclusive. So we'll cover off the open work exclusive as well. So we've got two types of products at Landbay, two sets of criteria. One criteria for small portfolio, and this is our kind of vanilla end of the buy-to-let market, and we've got our portfolio range. So the small portfolio is very similar to how the PRA classify a non-portfolio landlord, which is 3 or less properties. However, what we do at Landbay, we include properties that are still unencumbered. Obviously, the PRA guideline is where properties are mortgaged. So the benefit we have with that is that actually if, for example, someone's got 3 buy-to-lets and they're buying their 4th, we would actually still allow that client within our small portfolio range to be buying a 4th property. Whereas within the PRA guidelines, obviously buying a 4th property would push that landlord into the portfolio realm. Now, the benefit of that is that actually you get a cracking rate. As you can see, I've put, as I've sourced yesterday, where we source with regard to a 5-year fixed rate, and the non-portfolio product actually sits top of the tree for the lenders, I believe, that you've got on panel. Obviously, I'm not a broker, so please don't take this information as advice. Obviously, it's just research that I did yesterday with regard to the lenders that are on your panel. And obviously, as you can see, we do sit pretty at 2.94 on a small portfolio landlord product. The other good thing as well, if you wanted to go green, that rate would also potentially reduce to 2.84 as well. So again, even more competitive if you do apply then the A to C rating on an EPC. The criteria, though, is a little bit more restrictive because we only allow 2 applicants, and we do exclude above and adjacent to commercial, and obviously no HMOs and multi-units. But again, small portfolio, because it's the top of the tree rate, obviously there has to be some restrictions there to kind of make it a little bit more vanilla. When it comes to our portfolio range, this is our bread and butter. The small portfolio range has been around for about 6 months, but we've always done portfolio lending. So essentially, Landbay have got no background exposure requirements. We can have a client that's got £100 million in the background of lending. We would have no exposure issue with the kind of number of properties in the background. We do assess the background, but we'll come to that shortly. The other benefit is that with Landbay, you can actually now borrow up to £15 million as well. It was previously £5 million, but the way we're funded by multiple funders allows us to actually increase that funding availability to landlords up to £15 million. And there isn't many lenders in the market that will allow lending to one landlord or obviously a limited company up to 15 million, especially if you take on board the fact there's no aggregation reduction, because what a lot of lenders do once you hit £5 million, they want your overall aggregate lending with that specific lender to reduce as you increase. So, for example, 7.5 million, they maybe want across the whole portfolio 7.5 million. They might want an LTV of 70% rather than obviously lending 75% for the first 5 million. So therefore, you'd have to reduce your lending substantially once you go beyond those lenders' kind of parameters. And as I said, even though we don't have any background exposure requirements, we do look at the rental stress on the portfolio. And the rental stress, we don't have too many that are knocked out by this. Obviously, the introduction of 5-year fixed rates do have an impact on the higher value properties that obviously where the yield is not quite as strong. The background stress test is 125 at 5%. Now, the good thing with that, it's basically a system that sits behind. So we ask you to, we'll move on to this shortly. We look at a portfolio, we do AVMs on the rental and the value of the property to look at the background stress. There's no LTV requirements, but there is a rental requirement, as say the 125 at 5%. I don't know why I've put the open work exclusive product there, but it's just, I'll bring it in later, but it is to emphasize actually the exclusive that you have today, even though I was saying that our small portfolio and landlord product is one of the most competitive, if not the most competitive 5-year fixed rate at 75% on the market. The benefit is the open work exclusive we've got is also at 2.94, but allows portfolio borrowing rather than just the smaller landlord as well, which is obviously great news for the open work panel. James is going to have a quick kind of discussion around the types of things that we look at differently to, I suppose, an individual application against a portfolio application as well.
Yeah, so we got a smallish team of underwriters, including myself, heading it up. They're all experienced underwriters. Jasmine's been at the company as long as I have. David and Katie have been here over 3 years and have experience of various other lenders as well. Dawn's a new addition, but she has been underwriting for 15 years plus as well. So it's an experienced team, so we should be able to understand portfolios and complex cases quite easily. And the kind of way we work here is as soon as even if the applicant doesn't start off as a portfolio landlord, we always have the continuity here that the same underwriter will always take the same applicant's cases. So they should understand the applicant and how they work, and therefore, as in theory, as the cases grow with us, then it gets easier and easier. So we will cross-reference automatically as soon as a new case comes in. All existing relevant documents get copied across, so we should only ask for relevant up-to-date documents. And we're trying to implement a lighter touch underwrite on existing portfolio applicants, so we won't need a full 3 months bank statements. We'll only need the latest bank statement to show the rent and mortgages, and we won't need to evidence all of them. It will just be a certain portion of the portfolio, depending on the size of the portfolio. I mean, if it's only 10 properties, then we might want to roughly see about 5. Whereas, if it's 100 properties, we're not going to want to see 50. We just want to make sure it makes sense, really. So yeah, on all portfolio cases, we'll need a business plan, which we have our own templated document on the website for. It's just 3 simple questions. We need the portfolio uploaded on the e-tech that other lenders use, such as Paragon and Ian explained. It's just the 125 at 5 on the background portfolio. We don't need every property to meet that. We just need the portfolio as a whole to stress at 125 at 5. And we're not concerned what the LTV is on the background portfolio as well. As long as the individual properties meet the individual products with us, then we're good. And also for we have a clone functionality on our on the system. So once you've submitted one case, you can go into that case and then clone it. So you can just change the relevant details, change it to a purchase, change it to a remo, change property details, which saves with mass keying. And as it says on limited companies, you can also add and remove applicants as well. So if the structure is potentially changing or it's a different company within the portfolio, then you could change the company name and change the directors as well. Our limits are for the individual, not for the company. So we do have scenarios where you've obviously got people in property, they're obviously friends with other, they've got companies with different other people. So exposure kind of follows them across the companies. So we look at their individual exposure to us, not the company exposure to us. And also we do review once an individual gets to about 2 million with us. We have like a face-to-face interview with them just to talk through the business plan, essentially, make sure the applicant does know their portfolio and what they're doing, and then we'll review it again at 5 million and again at 10 million. In some circumstances, in some cases, we will go out and meet them, which me and Ian have done a couple of times, just to help the relationship really, and just to see that they do know what they're doing. And that's pretty much it, really.
Just to reiterate, that's a mutually benefit kind of meeting. It's obviously to understand so we can support further growth for that landlord, but also for them to understand a little bit about what we want to see and what we want as well as a lender. So it's a very beneficial process that it's not something to be concerned about. It's actually there to try and aid and assist and make sure that we both are obviously achieving what we want to achieve, and that's a strong portfolio. Yeah,
I'd say all the interviews, I've done a couple this week, they've all been mutually beneficial. We get to know the applicant, they get to know us, and we're happy for them to ask us questions to understand the process as well. So it kind of sometimes helps allay any fears they may have, and can ask us direct questions as well.
And the broker, I should point out, the broker can be involved in that as well. Yeah. But the other thing as well, we are an intermediary only lender, so obviously the fact that we're trying to meet the client has no kind of bearing on future aspirations. We are an intermediary only lender and will continue to be an intermediary only lender. So obviously James mentioned there about supporting documentation literature. I just want to touch base in regard to kind of quell some of the concerns that people have when they're dealing with a portfolio client. They get concerned with having to do a business plan and obviously do the background e-tech. Hopefully the next kind of page will summarize and give you some support in the fact that actually it's not as concerning as you might think. So when the business plan is essentially there because we want to understand the client. So all we're trying to do is build up 3 kind of questions, and the questions are the buy-to-let history. How did the client come to being a buy-to-let? It can be simply it can be whatever answer they can. There could have been an accidental landlord many years ago. They could have surplus income in their self-employment, savings, etc., and obviously diversifying their portfolio. Obviously, just understanding where they came to come into the buy-to-let, what kind of strategy they did or have they got one. Obviously, if you've got more than 4 properties or 4 properties or more, then really you're going to have a strategy in regard to, are you going to buy more? Are you going to buy in certain areas? And that's all we're looking at. We're looking at the types of properties they might be buying. And obviously the third question, what do you need from us? Essentially, are you going to continue? Are you going to stop at 4? Do you want to roll it out? Do you want to change someone's HMO? Just a little bit about the strategy. So it's at the end of the day, it's a couple of paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, and it doesn't have to go into rhyme and verse, whatever that kind of phrase is. It doesn't have to go into great detail, but just pick out the key points. And normally, as a broker, you would be expected to ask the clients those kind of questions anyway. So it should be very straightforward. So please don't be concerned with your business plan requirement. It is just those 3 questions. And when it comes to e-tech as well, sorry, I think our pictures are in the way. When it comes to e-tech, it's a system essentially that was designed by e-tech, the company, to aid background assessment, because obviously the PRA requirements came in for all lenders, or majority of lenders that are PRA regulated, to check background with regard to making sure that that landlord is able to cope with fluctuations in interest rates, fluctuations in regard to arrears and voids on properties. So obviously it's a good thing for a landlord to look at this to make sure that they are covered. So what we tend to do, we have a spreadsheet on our system, on our website, that pre-populate, they can ask the certain questions. And usually landlords will have a spreadsheet, but there might be a few extra questions. For example, is it occupied? Is it not occupied? Is it an HMO? Is it not an HMO? And we ask a quirky one as well with regard to how long it's owned. The how long it's owned is not that relevant. It's not actually on our spreadsheet, but we do need to know it. But the good thing is we'll do the heavy lifting for you. So if you've got a spreadsheet, we've got a third party that will actually upload all the details onto e-tech, as long as the client's spreadsheet is very similar to the spreadsheet that e-tech will use. Or the benefit is, as James said before, we're not the only lender on eTech. So the benefit of you uploading and taking a spreadsheet that the client provided to you to then upload to the system means that not just Landbay, but many other lenders, for example, Paragon, and I think
Ken.
Yeah. I'm just trying to remember who was on the Open panel. So yeah, it's essentially relevant for you to maybe keep in your kind of documents rather than kind of obviously giving it to us, because if you give it to us, then we do it for you, and then you can't see it visually, unfortunately. And I say that eTech document is simply to look at the rental behind the scenes and the yields that the portfolio creates. The LTV is relevant within reason, but again, we've not got any kind of specific LTV requirements. So if it's 85%, that's not an issue. We can still do it as long as the yield is there at 125 or 5%. So that wraps up a little bit about portfolio. Again, one thing to say that obviously we welcome. We've already had a cracking portfolio from Openwork, and we've only been on the platform, the network for Openwork for just over a month. But I think James picked up that case, works smoothly. Well, actually, not James himself. One of his team picked up the case. I think we enjoy portfolios because, one, it's easy for us as well as a lender, and I think it's also good because we can copy all the documents over on every single case. I think it is very smooth and efficient, and we do what we can with regard to fees as well. If we're doing a large number of cases, we do normally charge the administration fee. For the right case, we can look at, if you've got 10, maybe we can knock a couple of the admin fees off as well to kind of ease the pressure, because it's good for us and obviously it's good for your client as well. So please do refer to a BDM on that case, on that scenario. So I wanted to touch on some criteria. I know many of you will be in the sessions that we've done, so hopefully this will be kind of very familiar to you. But I think it's important just to reiterate some of the kind of key features we've got with regard to our criteria on limited company. Probably about 75% of the business we write at Landbay is on limited company, and I think that will continue, both on purchase applications and even on remortgages. I think with the time of year it is, because back in 2016, lots of people took 5-year fixed rates. There's a big 5-year fixed rate glut coming off in the next few months, which means there'll be a lot of remortgage business there. Potentially a lot of people that took 5-year fixed rates in individual name are now going to be looking to do limited company in a corporation. So obviously there's a big market there for us. So at Landbay, we do trading companies and we do SPVs. We've got a distinct product range for trading companies, and we do ask for 2 years history and for the limited company to be profitable. When it comes to SPVs, they can be day one setup. So there's no history, there's no, there can be a first-time landlord as well. There's no requirement for an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, to be set up for any kind of duration. So you wouldn't need account or anything like that. All you would need, but a housekeeping, is actually a bank account. So obviously opening a bank account, if you've set up a brand new SPV, is relevant because all lenders in our kind of group will ask for a direct debit to be in the limited company name rather than the individual name. We can go up to 4 applicants on a limited company. One of the questions we had pre-presentation was, would we accept an application where there are 5 landlords or 5 shareholders? We typically look at maximum 4, but I think the case was slightly different because I think we had 5 shareholders with 20% each and only 3 of them directors. We would be able to do that because we only need shareholders that got more than 25% to be included in the mortgage application. All directors would have to be on. So in that circumstance, the 3 directors would have to be subject to the mortgage application, and the 2 shareholders with only 20% each would not need to be included in the mortgage application. We do layered limited companies, and we did a big presentation on layered limited companies a few weeks back, and that's where you've got a holding structure, and perhaps the SPV we're lending to is not actually owned by individuals, it's then owned by a holding company. We can look at that kind of circumstance as long as we understand who the ultimate beneficial owners are. We accept things like intercompany loans. Again, we did a nice little presentation on that. Again, please refer back, but we can accept intercompany loans. Maybe refer to your BDM or the underwriters directly in regard to the complexity of intercompany loans, because there are some caveats and some circumstances where perhaps they're not as transparent as they need to be, but typically we do accept intercompany loans. And we go up to 95 as long as we've got someone that's actually slightly younger on the application form. Our usual age is 85, but obviously the benefit with a limited company is there's no specific cessation date. A limited company essentially will carry on regardless of the age of the applicants and the shareholders and directors. We do ask for SIT codes, both on the trading company, we'd ask for a SIT code to be incorporated for property. Also with an SPV, there's a set requirement for a SIT code for property related business. The good thing is for limited company, we don't take floating charges or debentures, but we obviously do take a personal guarantee from the individual. We've got HMOs as well. It's also good to pick up on HMOs. We've got two different types of ranges. We've got a small HMO and a large HMO. We class our small HMO up to 6 bed and large is 7 to 12 bed. Minimum valuation is £120,000. We have actually got a benefit. Certain areas will be able to take advantage of an HMO being worth £75,000. Again, please refer to the website. All the details are there. Maximum LTV is 75%. But the good thing is the maximum loan size for anyone southern based. Although saying that, I have got a few high value properties up north actually that have kind of met that 1.5 million on HMO value. We only need, you can go up to 75% at 1.5 million, I should point out as well. We only need 12 months experience from a landlord, which is decent. Although we do accept on our small HMO range, we do accept up to 70% with no experience. And we also use on HMOs what's called investment valuations. We did a little piece on investment valuations a couple of weeks back. Investment valuations are very relevant to HMOs, but you're going to make sure they're not sold incorrectly. So any questions you might have on HMOs, please do speak to the underwriting team or your BDM. Then we move on to multi-units as well. Minimum value for a multi-unit, again, is £120,000. And again, we separate the product, small multi-units up to 6 units, and then large multi-units up to 7, from 7 to 12. And again, 75% of 1.5 million is acceptable. And again, you only need 12 months experience, regardless of the size of the multi-unit. However, we will accept, again, first-time landlords, as long as it's up to 6 units and it's maximum LTV of 70%. We do look at investment values again on multi-units. Things to watch out for when it comes to multi-units is the self-contained nature of a multi-unit. So what we're trying to do is avoid bed sits, really. And bed sits, there's a market for bed sits, certainly, but it's probably a little bit, our pricing probably dictates that we're looking at the better quality stock rather than the bed sits, unfortunately. Because bed sits, you can find the bathrooms are on the opposite side of the hallway. They're not self-contained. They don't have split meters. They're a little bit harder to manage potentially for a landlord as well. So therefore, we've got a requirement for self-contained, which means that the utilities have to be split, and obviously all the actual bedrooms and the bathrooms and the kitchen has to be self-contained away from other flats in that block. The good thing is, though, there's no minimum value per unit. Lots of lenders have minimum values per unit of, say, £50,000. We don't have that. But each unit does have to be 25 square meters. Also, the key benefit with ourselves is, as the picture on the left-hand side shows, doesn't have to be flats. The common kind of picture of a multi-unit block is a block of a house, which is a block of 6 flats. Actually, with us, if that piece of land has been bought by a developer and they built 3 houses on it, and they've not split the titles on each one of those houses, and it still retains or remains on the freehold, we can consider still lending as a multi-unit freehold block on houses or muse houses or terraced houses, etc. Anything to add, James?
Not really. Utility, we're not always concerned if the water isn't split, and in some cases we can consider if there's a communal heating system, as long as the boiler's not in one of the self-contained units. But yeah, as Ian says, we will look. It doesn't have to just be flats. We do get quite a few, say, small infill developments. There might be a couple of houses and a block of flats, or a developer's done a small development of 5-6 houses, wants to keep the development. Doesn't want the stamp duty or whatever implications of splitting it all up. and just wants to retain it, then yeah, we'll look at that all on one title.
Cool. So before I move on to my last slide, I think the other bits to pick up, I think there's a couple of questions. Do we lend above commercial, adjacent to commercial? Yes, we certainly do. We'll lend up to 75% above commercial and adjacent to commercial. Unfortunately, though, we don't allow noisy and smelly typically. Always best to refer on to the BDM or, as I say, the underwriter directly, because I think I've emphasised in this meeting today, the benefit you have with Landbay is you do have direct access to the underwriters. So for any questions you've got for existing landlords or cases, you can go directly to the underwriters that have the case. Yeah, above commercial, the noisy and smelly. So we exclude pubs, kind of takeaway fast foods. Unfortunately, we have on occasion looked at some of the ones that are maybe high value, maybe a couple of floors above the commercial. So again, the ones that are literally next door to the chip shops and the kebab houses, unfortunately, we would struggle within the pubs and the bars and the nightclubs even. We also do day one refinance as well. I think there's a question on day one refinance. Day one refinance, the client buys a property of £100,000, does some work, some significant work, and the value is now increased in value. We can lend on the increased value as long as those works are substantial. We ask for a list of the works and a breakdown of costs. We don't typically ask for the invoices though, because we do appreciate that maybe a contractor themselves have done the work. So therefore we ask for the list of works rather than the kind of invoices for that work. Finally, before we move on to questions, I just wanted to reiterate, we've got some fantastic exclusives available via Openwork. And again, this mirrors very similarly the chart I showed originally, which showed Landbay top of the tree for 5-year fixed rate at 75%. This hopefully should show that this product will be far and above the best products when it comes to 75% lending at 75 on 5-year fixed rates. It's a 5-year fixed rate. It's an Openwork only exclusive with a rental calc starting at 2.94. So in a limited company structure, it will be 125 at 2.94. If your buy to let doesn't work at that, it's not a very good buy to let. Also, in individual name, it's 140 at 2.94. So even then, you should find that even high value properties do work at that kind of rental calculation. The other benefit against the non-portfolio range, or the small portfolio range, I should say, we can accept above commercial on this product. Again, not noisy and smelly. Although I haven't pointed that out, we do commercial, we do laundrettes and dry cleaners and hairdressers. We don't consider them in the same kind of space as noisy and smelly. And again, 75%. So we've got a product that's a standard, which can be for remortgage or purchase up to 1.5 million. Loan starts at 150, unfortunately, but obviously still very, very competitive. The remortgage product also is between 500 and 1.5, and that's a cash back of £500 for the higher value properties. It doesn't exclude, though, unfortunately, new builds and trading companies. I think we've had a few questions already, but that does bring us to the end of the sessions, criteria sessions at Openwork. I think we've had a good attendance today, so thank you very much. I think we've had a few questions as well. James, do you want to check? Do you want to share the questions?
Yeah, I've answered them in the chat, but I'll probably expand on them a little bit. Yeah, we do allow applicants to buy to let next to their main residence. Just has to have clear boundaries, and not, as I've happened to have in the odd case, there's a door between the two. Can't have that. As long as there's clear boundaries between two properties, we have no issues doing a buy to let next to the main resi. And day one remos where the title isn't updated yet, we just need the title updated before completion, so we can offer it. We just have a standard condition on our offers that say solicitors to confirm that the title's updated prior to completion, just because we'll need to know that the original purchase price is registered correctly. So we may ask for the TR1 form to go with the source of funds on that. And yeah, that covers off both the questions really.
Did we have any questions that we didn't cover off?
Limits to portfolio we covered off in the presentation, so yeah, we'll we can in theory do up to 50 million with us, and we don't have a limit on their background portfolio. It can be as large as they like. And you covered off the shareholding one, and the other one was about business plan, which we covered off. We've got our own simple business plan, and we don't ask for an asset and liability statement. We just ask for the background portfolio. So that covers off everything.
Excellent. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed the sessions. Thank you for being patient with us when I had some technical problems in the last couple. I think I turned up late to one as well. So, and I hope to see many of you at one of the Open Work Roadshows in the future. Thanks very much for being part of the presentations. Have a good week all.
Oh, there's just a quick one from Jasmine again saying, if you mentioned or not, yes or no to first-time buyer, first-time landlord. We used to be able to consider first-time buyer, first-time landlord, but we can't presently. We used to and they used to have a minimum employed income of 85,000, but we currently it's not being funded by our funders. So it's something that might come back in the future, but at present we're not doing it.
It's a great kind of criteria as well, Jasmine. So thank you for raising it. James is part of the credit committee as well. So very relevant and nice to see that. Obviously, there's another question as well from Jasmine. Thank you. It's good to see that obviously the brokers are asking these questions, because I think there is a market there, obviously from a lender's perspective, and obviously brokers as well. I think the concern is always backdoor residential. But I think obviously as long as we can get comfortable with the case, I think hopefully there is a market there for us to go into in the future. As James said, at the moment we can't do it, but we are working on that kind of criteria in the future.
We did do a couple when we could. And gifted deposits, yeah, we can do gifted deposit. It has to be a direct relative, so or spouse, so husband, wife, grandparent, parent, aunts and uncles. Normally not. Son and daughters, fine. It can be 100% gifted or a percentage. And the only thing to maybe with gifted deposits is if it's a limited company purchase, technically you can't gift money to limited company, but the parent could gift their son the money, and then the son could put it into the limited company as a director's loan. So there are ways it can be structured as acceptable, and we've got forms for intercompany loans and director's loans as well to cover that. So yeah, any scenario like that, feel free to discuss it with us. And yeah, just to add, when an underwriter picks up the case, we will send you an email direct and call you as well. So it will be the underwriter, not a phone person. So you will, from day one, you'll have our direct access to us to ask us any questions you like. There's another one. Buy-to-let remortgage. Currently, husband and wife own the property now. Want to remove husband from the mortgage, nominee as it says do. Yeah, we'll do transfer of equity where a party's been removed or added. It's again just a standard offer condition really that they're being removed. If someone's being added, just might need to be aware there might be stamp duty implications, because technically it's a purchase if someone's being added onto part. Although we'll do it as a remortgage with someone being added, technically that part's a purchase. And also for limited companies, same sort of thing. If a director's buying out another director, we can look at that as well. So as long as we're just conditioned that it's updated on completion. So we can do
that same point as well. Thank you, James. The other point as well, that in regard to gifted deposit, we can do gifted deposit. We all can do equity deposit as well. So where the equity is passing from father and mother to son and daughter. Again, the same scenario. It could be 100% gifted equity. I suppose the question we'll ask on that circumstance is that obviously the clients are being gifted the property and they've got obviously a residential in the background, because obviously they would be first-time buyer, first-time landlord. I don't think there's one other question as well, James. Did you read that now?
It's just following on the transfer of equity. It's saying adding is not a problem, but removing is an issue with quite a number of lenders. It isn't an issue with us as such, because obviously the person that's left has to meet the policy on their own. So as long as they meet our lending policy, then we're fine with that.
Obviously, it's got to be a new application though. So existing clients, unfortunately, if, for example, we had a 5-year fixed rate and they were divorcing, that unfortunately is a bit of an issue because they can't be removed whilst they're in situ. But obviously, a new application, we can actually accept the transfer of equity. And James points out quite correctly that there might be some stamp duty implications, but obviously, from a lender's point of view, that is not our domain. That obviously is the solicitor's domain as well.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. We've got another one.
Equity gift /
Sorry.
So
I'll answer this from a sales perspective.
Yeah.
So no, they don't. But obviously, what we're looking at, if you've got someone that's been gifted the entire deposit, we want to make sure that they can obviously afford the void potentially in the buy-to-let. We want to make sure. So, say for example, you've got someone that was gifted an equity in a very valuable house. And their income is only just hitting our minimum at £25,000, and they were continually in their overdraft, then that might be a question, a concern for us as the lender. So yes, it's in criteria, but obviously there's a few extra kind of parameters that we'd want to see that kind of make us comfortable the fact that it's affordable for that client to actually take on board that property. Is that correct, James?
Yeah, I'd also add, if the purchase price is under market value, it would depend how much it's under. So we'd lend on the lower of the value or the purchase price. But say if the property is worth 300,000 and they're purchasing at 150,000, we're going to ask questions and have some concerns. But say if the property is worth 300,000 and it's a private sale or concessionary purchase and they're buying it at 280, 290, we're not really going to ask any questions. If it's, say, 10, 15% below market value, that'd be an acceptable amount for us. Whereas if it's a lot more than that, then we're going to have concerns.
Obviously, we'd have to go through the market value there. Obviously, no, we wouldn't base our lending off the actual concession amount. We'd base our lending off the actual full value, but obviously we couldn't borrow more than the concession amount. Does that make sense? Have I made sense there?
No, it's kind of contradictory. It will lend off the lower of the T, the market value, or the agreed purchase price. So cool.
Thank you for listening. I'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Cool.